His pilot conversion rate is 95%. That's Nathan Killick, senior sales leader at Definely. And no, that's not a typo. In 18 months, Nathan took Definely's US revenue from 1% to 30%, selling into AmLaw 100 firms from a London office. We get into how he uses AI in his sales process and how he has cut his CRM admin from an hour to 10 minutes, and why, in an industry losing its mind over Harvey and Legora, he still calls the phone the best thing ever. This is taking LegalTech to market. Let's go.
Nathan, in your role, I know you get to speak to some of the top law firms in the world, like Slaughters and Mays, Freshfields, that kind of thing. What are they saying to you about AI in their world right now that maybe you weren't hearing 12 months ago?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think, the things that I was hearing 3 months ago is changing, let alone 12 months ago. I think there's quite a few themes, and we're seeing them kind of progress over time. One is the build versus buy. You see Kirkland and Ellis recently. They're investing, $500 million into their own proprietary AI tools, which makes sense because of their data. But that is very different to how a lot of the firms are kind of jumping into the Harveys, Legoras, and being in this market for a long time now. When Harvey and Legora, or it was Harvey initially, and Legora was called Leia, the market kind of halted a little bit and was like, oh, hang on a minute, this is really interesting, but we don't know what to do. And so they're waiting for the movers and the shakers. And then people started jumping in, and then all these pilots started. And so 12 months ago, it was very much, we have to pilot Harvey and Legora. Like, everybody has to stop everything that they're doing. All the projects got put on hold. And Harvey and Legora, because of their marketing efforts and also because of, how they approach the market, and because AI is such a big thing now, that was the drive. And I think essentially what's kind of happened is there are firms like Freshfields that have taken a step back, and it's public knowledge, they've not gone with a Harvey or Legora, they've gone all in with Anthropic. What some of these firms are doing is they're taking a step back and they're analyzing what's happening, they're doing their own due diligence, and there's lots of other firms that are just copying the others because they think it's the thing they have to do. So yeah, there's lots of kind of different narratives that I'm seeing. One is we've got to jump in and make the investment with Harvey and Legora work, and they haven't got the internal resource or capability to build something themselves. The other I'm seeing is, how much do we trust the foundational models like an Anthropic or a Copilot? And, can we maximize what we're spending with our Microsoft license, or, getting a Claude license, and how to do that? There are others that are not doing any of those things. And, one in particular, which is a customer of mine I'm working with at the moment, they're not doing either of those things. They're more looking to best of breed tools. So they're mapping out their pain points, and they're looking at their current vendors or best of breed vendors and saying, can we solve all these pain points with best of breed solutions, as opposed to just, handcuffing ourselves to one provider? So yeah, it's definitely very interesting. And it does change all the time.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting take as well. I mean, I said 12 months, but I think in this world of AI, 3 months can feel like 12 months, can't it? Because things are moving so quickly. So cool. Okay, so my understanding of Definely's go-to-market motion, you will correct me, I'm sure, if I'm wrong, is that it's not a typical AI sales play. My understanding is you don't ask the lawyer to learn a new platform. You sit inside the tool they already use. So if that's right, which hopefully it is, talk me through how that distribution choice actually plays out in the sales cycle. What does that first conversation with a partner at a top 50 firm sound like?
Also, another interesting point, because one of the things that you find in working in a startup, especially when you're kind of involved in the front line as well as, contributing to the strategy, is things change, right? Being in a startup, things change a lot and you have to change a lot. So, AI has impacted our business drastically. And so, 12 months ago, we were talking about, how Definely sits in that drafting space and owns the drafting space. which for the most part was absolutely correct. What is a recent thing that we're starting to see is that, well, actually there is a different category opening up where Definely has actually excelled since day one. And because AI is starting to own a lot more of some of the drafting process, right? Not all of it, but law firms and in-house legal teams, they are using AI to draft playbooks and markups and things like that. We've actually identified a slightly different position that I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail now because it hasn't been publicly released properly, from Definely. But the problem statement is this: the more that AI is generating contracts or creating markup in documents where the lawyers, the end users themselves, have to go and review and verify, the more AI is doing that, it's actually creating more review work. So the conversation with the partner is, well, look, your associates are using more AI tools to draft contracts in Microsoft Word, and they were generating lots of work or contracts to be reviewed in the first place without AI. What does that mean for you, the partner? Well, the partners are on the hook reputationally, right? And for the work, because they are liable to the client. So a partner is receiving more contracts to review that have been touched by AI as well, whether it's a third-party document coming in or whether it is an associate internally that's given them a contract they've worked on. So the problem is that, well, the partners, the lawyers still need to review these contracts, and they're starting to need to review these contracts at scale. Now, Definely has never been that high volume, low value NDA contract review. Definely has always been the high complexity, the high value, the high stakes contracts, deals, multiple, annexes and schedules. So long story short, and to answer your question, really where Definely is sitting is in this, well, look, regardless of what you're using to draft, whether it's AI automated or if, you're using other, market tools to assist with drafting, you still need tools to help you with the review and verification process. And if you use an AI tool to draft a document, you can't then rely on that AI tool to verify its own output. For example, if you ask any LLM-based product, doesn't matter if it's Harvey Legora or Claude Legal, if you ask it the same question 10 times, it'll give you a different response. How it works. So if you asked, an AI platform, can you please give me 100% clarity that this is the right answer? You're not going to trust it. So you do still need that kind of independent support and verification layer and control layer on the output. So hopefully that answers your question. And I'm talking about something that is in the middle of a transition right now, much like the rest of the market is in a form of transition themselves.
Absolutely, of course it is, yeah. And what is your ICP right now? So I think I read that your CEO has said 70% law firms and 30% in-house, but is that the same shape that your pipeline is in right now, or is one side growing faster?
I'd say that's a fair ratio. What's interesting about our ICP is that they sit across in-house contract functions, so in-house legal, commercial contracts, and procurement and sourcing. And I've experience in those areas. And then law firms, of course, for transactional lawyers. So they're the headline ICP. Typically, ICP in-house are going to be where those, very complicated contracts are being kind of negotiated and reviewed. Often the value sits with third-party documents because in-house legal, if they're familiar with their own templates, they don't need tools to assist with the review of those documents. So that's the kind of the high level. But honestly, we're starting to see lots of different, use cases and value propositions coming through. For example, Ericsson as a customer of mine that I brought on board a long time ago. I say a long time ago in SaaS software. It was a long time ago. It was about 3 years ago now. What we identified was that the contract managers at Ericsson, the managed infrastructure company, they're having to review and negotiate very huge, complicated master services agreements with telecoms companies, Vodafone or governments or Verizon, but they had no tools to support them with it.
Mm.
The scrolling around, the control F on definitions, the multiple documents, and these contracts are going to be worth multi-millions. So in terms of ICP, as I say, just to kind of paraphrase, is we're looking at law firms, yes, absolutely, but the market opportunity for in-house is very big.
Yeah, I'm hearing that a lot, and I'm guessing you've got pilots, running all the time. What does a good Definely pilot look like? How do you convert it, and what have you seen kill it?
Very good. Another good question. What does a Definely pilot look like? And this is from my experience. And what we try to instill here at Definely is you need to be an extension of the customer. Any law firms or in-house teams, they're so inundated with tools to look at, and they always have been, but even now, even more so, that when they do decide to pilot, it's usually because they want it to be successful, because they've identified that if this goes well, we want to buy it. Now, if a vendor is not being supportive and helping grease the wheels in getting that process going and to a decision point, then you're killing your own deal at the end of the day. So for us, it's about understanding where are the friction points, where can they come up. It's usually InfoSec and making sure we've got the right pilot group and cadences across structure of pilot and things like that. So that's one thing. The other thing is honesty upfront, because I think and just from experience, so many salespeople, they try and get to this decision point by hook or by crook, and that will bite them eventually. So it's the success criteria part. It's this is what we're looking to achieve, or together, as in your outcomes versus what we can achieve together. This is where we can't deliver. So I'm not sharing any kind of confidential secrets here. For example, at Definely, one of the things we don't do is citation checking. There are tools out there that do citation checking. It's that's their bread and butter. I will always say that up front. And the reason it's good to do that is because you're managing the expectations throughout the pilot. You don't, you're not giving any kind of false sense of capability. The other thing is, for me, and maybe this is just a personality trait of mine, is I obsess over, structure and repeatability and, measuring success. So I treat pilots as a project that I need to manage. So I am effectively a project manager. That means, building, and agreeing mutual action plans with Gantt charts to see where things need to be achieved and when. It's bringing stakeholder mapping is something that just doesn't get done enough, in my opinion, where, and it's not just the typical CIO, CFO, chief innovation officer, etc., and just having those as stakeholders. It's about who are those people in that organization that are going to move things along, that have got reputation for delivering, that have got good relationships to move things along. So, and that takes a lot of work. The other thing is AI. And what I mean by that is I'm using AI quite a lot to support on pilots. So, where we have, the authorization from either the customer or the end users that are on training sessions, we record the training sessions, right? And one-to-ones. I do one-to-ones with as many pilot users as possible. And what I can then do is I can then tailor the training session recordings, the outputs and the use cases and the value that the end users are seeing. And you can tailor that back to the success criteria. And then you can use AI to generate these unbelievable outputs of whether it's reports or value calculations or whatever it might be that tie back to the customer success criteria that you've agreed. And I've been doing that for quite a long time where I can, right, time permitting and everything else. When you're juggling a million things, it's hard to get all the time to do all of that effectively. But what AI has now done is helped me to not just automate 75% of that process and those documents, but what it has also meant is that I can now run that process for all of my deals, large or small. Whereas before I was having to kind of prioritize a lot of things, right? There'd be things that would have to be dropped to deliver on some of the most urgent, important things. So that's not to say that some, other things are necessarily more important than others in terms of customers, but, you've only got so many hours in the day. So yeah, there's actually a lot that goes into a pilot, and, I guess something, that kind of speaks to the success of the pilots that I run. Over the last 2.5 years, maybe 2 years, since having a pilot confirmed from a customer officially that they want to pilot, my conversion rate has been 90 to 95%. And
that's awesome.
And the thing is it's not, product's great. Like Definey is an unbelievable product, but it's very easy to have a great product and run a terrible pilot. Fun fact, my first ever pilot at Definely that I ran after 4 months of being there was to a mid-market UK law firm that I knew, and I managed to sell one license. But being the sort of person I am, is I sat there and went, right, we I need to work out what it is that's broken here and how to, improve the process and make it repeatable and build checklists and, all that kind of stuff. And yeah, kind of never really looked back since.
You enjoyed that 50 quid commission or whatever you got from that one.
To be honest, I don't even think I would notice anything hit my account. I had a bit of explaining to do, but I think that the great thing was that the management here, they knew I was ramping up. I come from managed services as opposed to software, so running a pilot for software is very different to running a big complex cloud network infrastructure deal. And I just said to them, I said, look, it didn't go to plan, but here are the things that I've identified, and here's why it's going to go right next time. And then, the first kind of full calendar year that I had, I hit over 100% of target. So, they gave me the time that I needed, and I proved to them that it was worth the wait.
Certainly, I love that, and I think as well the points you made around there's lots of good products out there, and of course we're talking about pilots, but you also talked about that trust element by being clear around what you can't do. And I think too often we're focused very much on what can our product do, and we forget the human element of this, and who people are buying from us. They want to get a good product, but they also want to know they're going to be looked after by people. And I think just saying no to what you can't do and being upfront with that is part of that journey with it as well. And obviously we're talking about AI and what kind of drew me to this conversation with you and why I wanted to have it partly was because of how you're using AI, and I see your cool content you've got on LinkedIn, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. One thing I did want to pick up on was I think in our previous conversation you mentioned that you took US revenue from about 1% to about 30% over about a 2-year period or an 18-month period.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of firms I speak to, Series A, Series B, typically are starting in the UK, moving over to the US. Obviously, you've had a lot of success doing it from here. How do you sell into AM law firms, AM 100 law firms from London when you're not kind of boots on the ground?
Do you know, it's funny because to me at the time it was just a challenge that we needed to approach. I hadn't at the time realized just how much of a challenge it was for London-based software companies to sell into AmLaw 100 because, as I say, previously I was in managed services for UK legal and barristers' chambers. So when it comes to, being London-based and selling into AmLaw 100 firms, because the US market is so large, that you have to leverage lots of different things, where you've got referenceability in a global customer that you might already have. So A&O Sherman, for example, one of our biggest customers, one of our longest standing customers, they have offices in the US. The fact that, conferences like ILTACON, a little bit of a plug for them, I guess, but we invested in conferences in the US, and whilst we don't have an office there in the US, the rapport we were able to build with people and the relationships and the engagements you have with people face to face at a conference is unbelievable. And I'll never forget my first ever ILTACON. We were lucky with where we were placed. We were in Startup Alley, it was called, and we were at the end of a T-junction. So we had traffic from 3 different directions. And my legs were completely shot at the end of the week. I'd lost my voice. I think I'd probably done about 1,000 demos, at the stand. And I'd only been at Definely for a couple of months at that point. But the point is the energy, right? The product is great, but you've got to use the momentum of a great product to get in front of the right people. And so it's the stakeholder mapping. It's the being on. When you promise you're going to give something to somebody, even if it's an email or some information or whatever it might be, or answering a question, you've got to deliver that. You have to give it. And for me, if I was to, I try to get through as many of my follow-up emails in that same day. If I've had a meeting today and I promise I'm going to send them something, I try to get it back that same day. And I think that builds credibility. So that's a very big part of it as well. There is an interesting nuance as well with how US in general, US companies buy and sell. And I think I have actually been told by American customers that they really like UK legal tech. There's I know Avoca, shout out to the Avoca guys. They have some good US customers. Same with LegalTech, all UK based legal tech companies. So that's definitely worth it. The other thing I think is just being a persistent salesperson, in terms of how you operate. So I've mentioned persistence, it's discipline, but also having respect for people. I think the hard sell really doesn't work. And something that I've learned over the years is be honest, be human, build rapport, but don't build false rapport. Build like a genuine rapport with somebody, like take a genuine interest in them or their role. There's a customer of mine where I won't mention who it is, but they are up at 3 o'clock in the morning to get into the office in the innovation team so that they can start work by like 4:30 in the morning or something crazy like that. And I built a great rapport with them because, we would be emailing when they're up in the morning, and I'd be like kind of, having a bit of a light-hearted conversation with them. So, yeah, I mean, some of this stuff you can't really teach, I think. A lot of it is just about having a genuine interest and passion in what you're doing. And I had a genuine passion, not just in Definely in the product, but also working with, American law firms. Something else that I did as well was I pursued building a bespoke product for an Am Law 30 law firm. So there was a funds team. They were very specific about a problem they wanted to solve. It wasn't a product that we had or that we had built, but we probably out the box could, in terms of functionality and features and software, we were 50% of the way there. And so I, like a dog with a bone, said to them, look, we're willing to build this product with you and for you, and engaged on a proper project and commercial agreement where we would build this software for the funds team, which was successful. And off the back of that, got recommendations from them, and you leverage the referrals and, again, meeting them at conferences moving forward. And it's interesting, right? Because it goes to show that whilst face-to-face is very important and, being in the office and having those engagements is very important, it does prove that you don't need to be face-to-face all day, every day. Like, you can sell and build, relationships and win clients remotely. And, I think so long as you're doing all the right things, I don't think you necessarily have to be face-to-face all the time.
I agree. And is there anything you're doing in your sales motion? Sorry, is there anything you were doing in your sales motion 2 or 3 years ago that now you've stopped?
That's a good question. Definitely, there definitely will be. One thing that I, often ruminate on is when you're working with law firms or when you're prospecting law firms, there is an age-old kind of what's the word that I'm looking for? Push and pull, where the lawyers are essentially the end users, right? So they see the value in the software. So do you approach the lawyers and do you, build use cases with them and like a business case with them for specific groups and as well as introducing to innovation in KM? Or do you not engage with the end users and hope to be put on, the priority list with innovation in KM and wait your turn? And I think there's a healthy mixture of both. For example, where you get tech forward lawyers that are excited about technology and have problems that need to be solved, I think it's a great way to, build your credibility and, approach to building, a customer base if you have those engagements. But what you absolutely can't be doing is be pushing the attorneys, the lawyers, or the end users to be applying pressure to the decision makers, to the innovation team. Innovation and knowledge are so busy and inundated, and they half the time they'll know who you are if you're if you're in the LegalTech hub list of legal tech companies. And so a long time ago it was about understanding the best way to approach it. And at first maybe we were a little bit heavy with approaching lawyers directly, but now we've kind of identified, well, look, it is valuable to do it, but you've got to approach the right people, and you've got to do it with respect and very softly as well.
Makes sense. Okay, well let's talk about AI inside your sales process. So when we spoke before, I think you said you spend 8 hours a week on prospecting, a full day maximum after building out your AI agent stack. So what's in that stack? What does each piece do? Could you break that down?
Yeah, I can definitely talk to that stuff. So one of the first things I would say when it comes to this is you obviously have to be careful with the data that you're actually using. I think a lot of people do not take into consideration that you can't be using client data on like a public or a free version of ChatGPT or anything like that. They have to be within the confines and your the data policies and privacy policy within your organization. So the first thing I would say is don't just stick client data in ChatGPT free version. There was no real structure to how I went and built stuff, and for clarity, I'm using Claude Cowork, and the structure of it as it currently stands is 9 connected tools via MCP. So HubSpot, Gong, Gmail, LinkedIn, don't tell them that because they don't like it. Data enrichment tools, Notion for knowledge, Google Enterprise, so Google Calendar, Slack as well. And basically what that enables me to do is kind of using the skill creator that you've got in Claude is try and identify, right, where can I actually, what are the capabilities of this tool? Because it's the chicken and egg thing where I can't identify a problem that can be solved necessarily unless I know the capabilities of the tools that I'm working with. So it was, let me do some testing. Let me look at, is it the prospecting it can help with? Is it the data enrichment? Is it the preparing for meetings? Like, what is it? And the only way I managed to get anywhere in the first place was just by testing. So yeah, I think it's very much a case of you really have to just throw yourself in and test and test. And so to your point, I think it was, I think it was roughly around about 50% of my total account list I was actually really getting around to touch. So it was probably about 50 accounts each week. Whether it was like from prospecting or, with SDR support and everything else. But that has increased from 40% to, I think, around about 80% now. And the reason for that is because there are some automations that are very controlled around how I, prospect and canvas. But it's more about, because I've freed up a lot of time on the administrative stuff elsewhere, I can actually focus more on prospecting. And I believe very strongly in picking up the phone. Like, for me, speaking with people on the phone, whether it's a cold call, whether it's following up, whether it's, stakeholder mapping, whatever it is, the phone is the best thing ever. And I believe very strongly in kind of the cyclical loops. And the analogy that I love to use is, do you remember when years ago you would get, I don't know, 15 letters in the post at your house? And it was all marketing stuff, or it was letters from, the bank, or it was bills that you had. And then over time, what happened was email was created. And then people started to communicating via email, and it was tipped very much for business. But then what would happen was you'd get less letters, but your emails are now completely flooded. Like, I can't tell you my personal email, how many unread emails that I've got. But basically what happened was letters stopped coming in the post. And so then what happened was, after a number of years of that happening, companies started to revert back to post, because it was, it was actually the different thing to be doing. And I remember getting marketing leaflets through the door, several years ago, after email had been in control of everything, and basically thinking to myself, this is different. So coming back to AI, I know this is very different, but I see that, being on the phone to actually reach out to people is still the best way to do it. So I'm using AI to try and free myself up to have more of those valuable engagements, with prospects. And so one very specific example of that is, there's MEDDIC, right? And it's a framework. It's not for sole qualification, and it's not the stages in which you run a deal. But what it is for is, it's basically for a bit of a gap analysis. It's looking at where things are weak, where things are strong, where you can improve. Now, to truly dig into MEDDIC for every single deal in a pipeline, and so for enterprise sales, you've got a lot of target accounts. So from qualified onwards, it takes a lot of time to do that manually and to update notes in HubSpot and things like that. Whereas now, where you have notes recorded from meetings like Gong or whatever it might be, for notes to be automatically updated into the CRM, and for Claude now to be able to map out the MEDDIC fields for me based on the deals that I'm working, I don't update HubSpot in terms of typing out all my notes anymore. I just review what is about to be saved into HubSpot. So again, time saved there is, I'm not doing an hour's worth of CRM updates. I'm actually doing, 10 minutes worth of reviewing and tweaking before saving to HubSpot. There's a lot I think I could talk about, and I think that's probably quite evident. I don't know if there's anything in particular you want me to kind of.
Well, I think there's an interesting point around AI. I think for me, and I was talking about this with Andrew from Wordsmith actually on a previous episode. So with AI, I think the key to anyone utilizing AI is not to under rely on it, but not to over rely on it. And I think going back to that human touch is so important. And I think the point you've made around using AI to free up things from you so that you can get on the phone and talk to people is so key. So for instance, when Clay came out, 12, 18 months ago, and people were like, wow, I can just get all this enriched data, and then I can email 1,000 people. They're all going to get personalized emails. It's going to be a game changer. It might be for a minute, but not when everyone else is doing the same thing. And suddenly if your email inbox is even more clogged up, it doesn't even matter how personalized those emails are. They don't mean anything anymore because everyone's doing the same thing. And I think for me, I always try and focus on how can I make sure people know that this is a genuine approach and it's not AI. And I think I'd have to look back. I think I probably reached out to you in the first instance with a voice note, because that's for me, the way I can connect with you and make sure you know I've actually taken the time to send something to you specifically to talk to me about being on the show, rather than it being a case of I've sent it to 1,000 people using Clay. So I think that over reliance is really key. And the people who bring it back to that human touch whilst using AI to free up the other things that take them away from that, they're the ones who'll do well.
100%. I completely agree with you. But I think this is actually the big problem. Like, my wife says this a lot, actually, which is relevant but a little bit off-piste, where she says all these things that the world is using AI for, creating fake images or deep fakes, or creating Hollywood-esque based movies, when actually there are problems in the world that AI should be solving for. Instead, we're solving for all the wrong problems. Who wants to live in a world where you can't trust anything you see on your phone or on a computer? Nobody. Where does that lead us? And it's the same, right? I think in sales, you have, when I say sales, I mean kind of GTM with AI. It's where are we spending our time? Where are we using AI? Where shouldn't we be using AI? People have to test things. Things have to break. I've deleted skills that I've used, and I've changed schedules, and I've stopped doing things that I'd built 2 months ago, just based on measuring the output and realizing, hang on a minute, I'm wasting too much time doing this, or it's not giving me a positive kind of result. And so the things that I've seen that are most valuable in what I'm doing is specific CRM updates, account mapping and research. Again, that's something where specific ICP stakeholders, where it's not just any lawyer at JP Morgan, it's the lawyers at JP Morgan that are working on complex contracts. AI can help you go and get those people. I have a very specific way of running my meetings, so it's called the 6 steps process. I don't know how common it is, but I love following it, and I think it's a really powerful way to manage, any meetings that you're running. Well, I basically have fed Claude my template for how I like to run my meetings, and now every morning for any external meetings in my Google Calendar, it will go into HubSpot. It will find, the relevant information based on that project or that engagement, and it will generate this 6 steps template meeting preparation for me, for all of my meetings for that day. Back to the pilots, I have a pilot checklist that I check, religiously for every pilot to make sure we're covering everything. Mutual action plans, stakeholder maps, all of that is actually now automated. So whenever I move a deal from, qualified into pilot confirmed, Claude picks up on that. It then generates a folder where it says, here's, the new checklist, here's the mutual action plan based on everything, and the other thing that I've done is I've actually built a value calculator, which takes the Pursuit report that they did in 2026 on how for in-house counsel and pricing, but then it also takes the Thomson Reuters rate report of 2026 on how law firms are pricing and how that's changed across the UK and AmLaw and various other really interesting detail. And what I've done is I've looked at the value that Definely can bring, and I've tried to tailor it to not just you save X, which means you bill X amount more. It doesn't work like that. It's the operational value that, the internal operation value you get back. It's the value you get, engaging with clients on work. It's the, it's the risk management. It's the, how can we help reduce the amount of negligence claims from poor contract drafting? And there's this value calculator that Claude AI helped me build because I fed it these 2 reports. So for people out there that are not using AI at all, you're definitely missing out. But also for people that are using it in the wrong way, you're heading down the wrong path, and you know, it's not going to help you if you don't truly know what you're going to use AI for to benefit you and your customers.
I'm constantly have this fear with AI, and I've been using, since ChatGPT went wild in 2022, I think. I've been on it. I've been on it with AI, and I think the recruitment industry as a whole has been quite good like that. And I think I use it a lot, but I also always have this fear that other people are out there using it in a much more efficient and better way than me, and I'm falling behind. You are one of those people who makes me feel like that, but it's been really, it's really good lot of food for thought here, and I think for the audience as well. Just to kind of put a bow on this, I guess just a final question I'd like to ask, just if people listen to this show who'd be an earlier stage business, maybe an early stage go-to-market professional, what advice would you give to somebody who's kind of trying to get their product out to the right people in legal tech, sell to that kind of ICP? What are the kind of key things you'd say they need to do to be successful in 2026 and beyond?
That is a very good question. What I would say is the first thing is know your value proposition like the back of your hand, and know where you fit in this new world of technology and AI. And if you are at risk of, a Harvey or Legora soaking up your business, find a moat. Find a way to differentiate yourself. That's the messaging, and the clarity to the market is the most important thing. And we talk about, seeing the wood through the trees, or, being able to come out the other side of a storm and still be kind of relevant. And the best way to do that is to understand where your product or your service or whatever it is truly adding value that others can't, whether that's a people thing, whether it's a technology thing, whether it's a service thing. The other thing is with GTM, with sales, is don't just look at what other people are doing and copy them. An example of this is there's the kind of the typical SDR and account executive function, right? Where a lot of SDRs are just expected to go and lead gen. And then you've got account executives, which are, progressing deals along the pipeline, running proof of concepts and stuff like that. I've really saw an opportunity for, the junior sales people at Definely to assist and support the account executives on the more complex deals. What that meant was it freed up the account executives to do more work on more complex deals. So actually, it's about understanding where do you need top of funnel, where do you need to unblock, the bottlenecks in your process and in your business. And so, one of the things that I would say to that is the only way to be able to know where your blockages are and where your bottlenecks are is to understand your process. And again, your process is not the same as everybody else's. It's, for your product and your service, what do you need to hit for the customer? Is it InfoSec, or is it value proposition? Is it business case? At what stage? Is it procurement coming in early? Understand what best of breed or best practice looks like, and then start to build your motion around that process. And another good example of this is, early on in my career, I worked with, a set of deal stages in a process and thought to myself, okay, well, this is what the deal stages need to look like anywhere else that I work in future. This is, it has to be this stage, then that stage, and that stage. And then when I moved from one of my early stage companies into, my next role, I tried to apply that kind of thinking, that all the deal stages needed to be the same, when in actual fact, I was like, no, the deal stages are actually very different here. So there's some of the things that I would say. The other thing as well, if I was talking to a founder, if I was having a genuine conversation with a founder right now, it's like, and I there's a, I forget the, no. I forget the company. They're American based, and they do a lot of kind of GTM and sales podcasts, and it's annoying me that it slipped my mind. But they talk a lot about when to get a VP, when to have somebody with commercial experience, and maybe this is a wider conversation, just based on my experience, where when do you need which hires? Do you need a VP of sales on day one? Do you need, because you go from founder-led sales, right? Founder-led sales is very important, but then you also need to start introducing structure and process and, everything else, like a proper GTM, led sale. At some point, when do you start doing that, and who do you need to start leading that charge? The one thing I would say is always make sure you've got somebody that isn't afraid to sit in front of a customer and run a deal themselves. They have to be able to prove that they can sell your product or service. Yeah.
Great advice. Nathan, there's a lot of gold dust in here. I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to have this chat. And I really appreciate you being a part of taking LegalTech to market. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. And really appreciate it, Paul. Thanks for your time.